Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the February Opening the Box. Today, we will be talking about love stories that we found in the collection. So I'm really excited about this. There's some fun stories that I'll get to share, but most of them are going to be just tantalizing treats for you guys to get all excited about, and so you guys can come into special collections and read more about them yourselves, because there's quite a few that I just kind of barely scratched the surface with. But we'll jump in. My name is Catherine Kuntz. I am the Richardson-Sloane Special Collections Supervisor. I'm really excited to have you guys here with me, and we'll just jump in. So the first correspondence or love letter that we'll be talking about and love story is that it is coming from the collection 2017-14. It's the Salah family correspondence. It's actually just one letter in the collection. So it's just a letter in an envelope. And it was dated March 5th, 1873. It's from Ada Salah to her father, Dr. E.M. Salah. He was, they lived at West Port, Iowa in Lee County at this time. And then it is written in small handwriting, cursive, very beautiful, blue ink. It's a pre-returned address from the Immaculate Conception Academy where she was studying. And it's signed off as your loving child, Ada Salah. So it's just kind of informing them of her reception of their letter and telling a little bit of news about her life. But, oh, yay, Abigail is here. Hello, welcome. We're just jumping into the presentation right now. So I'm just talking about the Salah family correspondence. So this is from Ada Salah to her father, and it's just telling about her life in Davenport at the Immaculate Conception Academy. And so Ada was born to Dr. E.M. Salah and Susan Salah of B-Town. That was their present location at the time of her death and in her obituary. She was the sister of Dr. O.P. Salah of Bloomington, Wisconsin. She was born in Westport, Iowa on May 20th, 1858. In 1874, she and her family moved to B-Town. So shortly after she wrote this letter, and she later became married to John Burns on December 5th, 1877, and they worked as farmers up in Wisconsin. And that's where I found her obituary in a Bloomington newspaper. They had 5 sons and 3 daughters together, and all of whom were living at the time of her death. So that was very, I took note of that because most folks at that time unfortunately had infant deaths or childhood deaths in their family. But she was known for her musical talents that were on display also at the Academy of Immaculate Conception where she attended. There was a newspaper article in the Daily Democrat, and it was talking about her performance at a commencement ceremony and a performance of Our Pet Lambs. And this actually leads into how she met her husband. John and Ada actually could have met or been introduced at a performance of the Toodles and the Young Amazon that was held up in Wisconsin. So I'm guessing because the performance was around 1876, so about a year before they got married. So it's kind of fun to see those connections. And then this was all from her obituary that I gleaned or different newspaper articles from the Bloomington Record on May 27th, 1936. She died on May 22nd of that year. So she was age 78 and 2 days. And so from our records that we did a little bit before this, so probably around 2017 when we researched this, our staff found that there was an E.M. Salah in West Point, Lee County, of course, and he was listed in the census for 1856. So that would have been an Iowa census, and then the 1860 federal census. In 1870, he was listed in Patch Grove, Wisconsin as a physician. And actually, when I was researching her, and I later researched a little bit about him, they actually had advertisements about him in the newspaper as well. But unfortunately, we didn't find any Salah in the indexes of the Immaculate Conception, which makes sense because she was the only one that was really here in Davenport. So the next one that we'll go to is a very substantial collection in our archives, and it's the 2018-29 collection of the Phil and Linda Evans, also the Black and Scott Black collections, and the Elizabeth Beiderbecke Hart collection from the Bix Museum. So these materials are housed here at the library, but they are not ours. So we are taking care of them in agreement with the Bix Museum. But these are letters actually from a lady who knew Bix and dated him while he was alive. And they met down in Missouri, I believe. So the love of Bix was very impactful for Ruth Sweeney. So at the age of 22, both Bix, they were both about the same age. Bix and Ruth started dating. In September of 1925, he asked her out for a date. And according to her, very soon she was in love with him. He never went with anyone else while he was there in St. Louis area, and until he left her to join up with the Jean Goldcat Orchestra. So he might have dated other people after he left that area. But unfortunately, Bix died 6 years later. She didn't date for 5 years after Bix's death. And then she did end up marrying a Robert J. Sweeney, a sheet metal worker from 1936, and he died in 1961. And this is all according to a really substantial article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch from St. Louis, Missouri, that was published on September 24th, 1972. And it was on page 337. So I think it was a big anniversary edition, and there was several pages dedicated to Bix. But she is an interesting lady. So I will actually turn on my camera and show you guys a box, 2 boxes that belong to her. So I don't know if you guys can see, but there's two boxes that are record centered carton boxes that are full of her material. So it's quite a bit of stuff, and I just kind of barely scratched the surface with it. And so these are just a couple examples of her writing style. She was very verbose. She was a prolific authoress of letters. So in this particular letter, so she is writing to Mr. Philip Evans. He is, along with his wife, Linda, they wrote a book about Bix. I think it's called the Bix Beiderbecke Story, and we have a copy of it in our collection. But predominantly that's what composes this collection. And so these are just letters that he received from her. So we don't know what we can get glimpses of what he wrote to her, but we don't really get to see exactly what he wrote, because her responses are kind of funny sometimes. So it'd be interesting to see what he actually wrote. But in this particular letter, she states that around May 7th was around the last time that her and Bix saw each other. But it was kind of confusing because even inside the letter, she said that, they didn't see each other, but then they met up at the train and they saw them one last time before they left. So it'd be interesting to make sure to confirm this in reading her other letters. But the next one, so this letter is also to Phil. She believed that she was really kind of the main woman in Bix's life. In the article from the St. Louis newspaper article, there were some, and then also in this letter, there's some mystery around if Bix was dating someone around the time of his death, who he intended to marry, but that will have to remain a mystery since he passed away. And there's a lot of controversy around Bix in certain aspects. But on the second page of the letter, she actually writes, she's talking about this time when, because he had money, but he couldn't go anywhere to spend at a hotel or something like that. And so he always stayed with her and her sisters in St. Louis. And so he said that his money was all locked up in this trunk, and that Whiteman, one of the other the jazz groups that he was a part of, like there was some sort of issue with him getting his access to his money. But she says that she had Bix all to herself because her sisters were out of town or left to go to the country, I think that she said. And she said that her sisters were crazy about him and that whatever we did for him was a real pleasure. So they really liked his friendship and his company. And she said, believe me, much was different in St. Louis when he was there. So she later goes on to say, like, she doesn't really understand why people are saying all these kind of unfavorable things about Bix and how he lived his life, especially near the end. And so, because apparently he didn't act that same way there. So it'd be interesting to kind of go through these collections and read more about firsthand accounts of Bix and his relationships with other people through their eyes. But she is very much smitten with Bix. So this next collection, the 2014-22, this is the Harriet Cole Estate Collection. So this collection I didn't get to dive into a lot, but it's quite beautiful. It's 1800s letters, late 1800s letters, and they're beautifully scripted with beautiful cursive and clear handwriting, very delicate. So this collection in its entirety contains images, the Davis family history, which I took some picture scans of, genealogical records, charts, notes, pages from the family Bible that were actually excised from the Bible, and then correspondence from around 1890 to 1940. And then there's also a letter from 1812. So this is probably one of our earliest items in our collection, besides the collection that Charles A. Fickey donated. And so that is it's really interesting collection. And so this letter in particular is from a child to their mother, and you can kind of see, I tried to choose a background that would make the text pop a little bit, but it just says, my dear mother, and they talk about kind of what life is like, and I think they're in in Washington at Mount Washington, and it's a beautiful scene. And then they sign off, affectionately yours. There's quite a few letters like this in the collection. And so just kind of more of the similar type of things. So this family, they did end up coming to Davenport, but a lot of the letters actually are from Newburyport in Massachusetts. And so we can see that genealogical movement of people, so the migration of people to the West to find work, to meet up with family, that type of stuff, to go where they need to. And so this one is from the father, and they just said, "We are all well," and oh goodness, that's a good word. "Join in sending love to you and the family." So they're just well wishing and making sure that their love is getting sent across the country. And so this one is actually a really beautiful poem that I think a child wrote to the mother. So there's stanzas, and it starts off with mother, and it's just a really nice, like, different type of way to see a letter, because they're doing it more in poetic form. And then this one is from two people that I don't really know too much about. They must be family members of some sort, but it's Molly and Clarence. And so they just are sharing some information back and forth to each other. In 1943, it looks like, and you can see how different the script is from earlier. And then these ones, I really like these ones. So this is from Davenport, or at least the stationery is, and then it's from 1905, I believe. And so it's just letters to the dad. So hello dad, hello pap, and then hello dad. And then they just are writing about information about what's going on in their lives. I think it's this collection. Yeah, this next letter is kind of funny. So it must be in response to all these letters that he's been receiving, because in one of the letters, the daughter complains that the dad isn't writing as much as she would want him to. And so she wants him to write more. But he's like, "My dear Emmy, dad answers, or dad's nerves are not in proper condition to do much writing." So he's like telling her, "Okay, don't write me so much, or don't expect so much from me." So it was quite cute. And so this one is the 1812 letter. So you can see how different it is from even the later 1800s, where it's a lot more cramped. It's you could see how they evenly spaced it up at the top, and then they started getting closer to the bottom, so they had to start condensing the letter so that they could fit it all in. And then they had like a little return in address thing on the back, so they probably folded it up and sent it that way for the person to receive it. And then it is actually in I believe it's in stable plastic, but there's Scotch tape holding the two pieces of plastic. So I'll have to look at that and make sure that it's in better condition going forward. But it's a beautiful letter. And then this is just getting into some of the genealogy materials that are in the collection. So this is an envelope for the certificate of marriage between Thomas Davis and Sarah Mallet. So those are two last names that are prominent in the collection. And so they got married in September of 1881 in Davenport. So you can see that. And then on the right side, you can see this really beautiful sketch of a boar heraldic shield and symbol. So I don't know if that's significant to that family, but it'd be interesting to see, because most heraldry it's specific to a family, but it's not like passed down in the traditional sense of how we think about it. But this is all the genealogy records and the notes that they took about the genealogy of the family. So one of our attendees is a great genealogist. So I was thinking about this while I was scanning it, because I was like, oh, this is like back in the day genealogy that, everyone wrote their little notes on stuff, and there was a little cluster of like when people were born and who when they died and things like that. And then this is where the little marriages thing to the right was found. So that was interspersed with that. But then there's beautiful like family group sheets that these two people were married, and then their children were listed below. So it's an interesting way to look at family history, because people have to record their history somehow. And so the next collection actually that we'll be talking about is a local family. So this collection came to us in 2019, and it was the 10th collection of that year. It's the Scott Family Papers. And so it was donated by Joe Scott, so the grandson of George Washington Scott. And he actually just recently passed away. I think it was last week. But we're very fortunate that we got to get this collection in our archives, because George Scott was also a mayor of Davenport. So this collection really consists of correspondence and papers of George Washington Scott and his wife, Rosemary Spear Scott, dating from 1860 to 1930s. The materials detail Rosemary Scott's early life in Peoria, Illinois, her school years at St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana, and then, or in South Bend, Indiana. And then her married life in Dakota and Oklahoma territories. George Scott was an Indian reservation agent, and then also a later mayor of Davenport. So this letter is actually, we think of letters between people before they were married as something gushy or with more affection shown in the language that was used. But this is a letter to Miss Rose Spear from George W. Scott, and it just says yours truly. And he's just kind of talking about different things. Like, I don't know if it's this letter, but one of them, I think he got stuck. I think he like he had trouble getting someplace, or something didn't work very well for him, so he was just writing about it. So they must have known each other well enough to, like, get past that gushy stuff. And this letter was from 1885. And then in one of his later letters, I'm hoping that we get to see it, but this is I know I put it in there, but this is actually a photograph of Rose, I believe from her time at St. Mary's Academy in South Bend, Indiana. It's a large image, so don't let it fool you. It's probably not 11 by 17, but it's around that. It's bigger than just a sheet of paper, the 8 by 10 type of photograph. So it's really quite impressive. But I believe this is a letter that I was thinking of. So in 1886, her sister must have been asking about George and like what his background was, what his religion was, like who is this guy? Is he good for you? All this stuff. So he wrote this letter in response to those inquiries. And so you may forward this letter to your sister and inform her that I was born and raised in Padua Township in Illinois, in McLean County, Illinois. My home address was in Leroy. My parents now live in Nebraska, and mail will reach them anytime. So he was, and then he talks about religious convictions. He said that his religion is humanity. I bow in respect to all honest religious convictions and acknowledge servility to no creed, dogma, nor have I given no time to the examination of doctrines of any sect. So essentially she must have been like, is he Christian? Is he, what is he? And then he just says, yours respectfully. But he remains pretty formal in all of their correspondence throughout their relationship. So they ended up getting married. This is from 1895. This is to Mrs. R.S. Scott. And he just says, dear wife, and he still goes with that, yours truly. So he's in Davenport at this time. So you can see that he's at the Davenport Abstract Company. He must be working there. And so it's just a little letter to her about different things that were going on in his life. And then this one was dated a little bit before, it must have been. So she's still in Peoria, and so they're still separate, but they're trying to work through that, because I think they married and then he was doing other things, so he had to come back and get her. Just some more letters. And so I believe this is to his wife again, and it's just, it's quite fun. All the different correspondence and the letterheads and things like that. So this is actually, I believe, from their daughter to them. So from, I think it's like Karina, or I can't really make out the name, but they also sent their daughter to St. Mary's in Indiana. And so she's just writing back to them and sending her love from school. And it's really nice when you have the letter, the envelope as well, because you can, if they don't date the letter, then you can date it by the postmark. And that at least helps you give a time frame for the letter. And then this one is from a cousin to Mrs. Scott. And so they're just talking about information, sharing news, things like that, what's happening in the family. And so you can see how the affection is changed in the sign off. Love to you all affectionately. A little bit less formal than her husband. And then these are some other letters that came to them. And it's just, I just love the letter. So I had to scan it so you guys can at least see it. And it's just, your loving children. So they're just writing to them and letting them know what's going on. But this collection is also really neat because she had a lot of scrapbooks. So some of the materials also pertain to her sisters, who also went to St. Mary's. And so they had other scrapbooks about their time at the school. but this one we believe belonged to her. So there are pictures of them doing a whole bunch of different stuff at school and their life around that time. And so very beautiful scrapbook with all the letters or the photographs and things like that. And then a thing of the past were autograph books. And so unlike how we probably think of getting signatures or little letters or notes rather in our backs of our yearbooks, they had a whole separate book for autographs and little notes of love and affection to folks. And so this belonged to Rosemary Spear, Rose Spear. And so these were her friends. I know some of them, the handwriting, their script is so light, and so it's kind of hard to capture it with our scanner because our scanner has a lot of light on it, but you can see how crisp but light it is. But these are all of her friends. They were talking about all their fun adventures and how they'd miss her and that she did well, and that they would keep in correspondence. And there are a lot of letters from her friends at that time. And then this is from her sister, Mary. And so this is just another type of letter that we see in the collection. So it's not just a spouse or mother to father to child, but also siblings writing each other, sharing information. This one, I believe, is either from a friend or a cousin, just telling more information. And you can see how they use different types of stationery, wrote on different pages. So sometimes they would write on the front page and then the inside page, and then on that inner page that we see flipped over. So it just depends on however they wanted to write the letter. Sometimes they numbered the order of the pages so that the person knew. So this letter is quite fun. It's actually 2 rows from a friend, her schoolmate, your loving little schoolmate friend, Brenda, I think. And so she's just catching her up on all the school matters. But the Scott collection has a lot of different materials that I would like to dig into a little bit more. This collection actually highlights all of our love stories in our collection. So this is a really great example. This is the Golden Anniversary Club collection. It was brought to us in 2014, and it was the 4th collection that year. And so this collection consists of scrapbooks, newspaper clippings from about 1946 to 2006, financial books, minute books, membership lists from 1975 to 2014, and then other miscellaneous materials. So you can see that the club actually got started in 1946 in Davenport. And so these were the charter members. They elected their president, vice president, and secretary and treasurer. And they this was actually, it's a scrapbook page, but they used crayon to color around the frame. It's quite cute because they did that on like most of the pages. So you can see like little lines on the scrapbook pages with crayon. And so this is coming from some of the materials that are coming up next are from the scrapbooks, this reference record and history of the Golden Anniversary or Golden Wedding Anniversary Club. So I'm guessing both of you know what a golden anniversary it is. It's after the wedding anniversary of the 50th 50 years of marriage together. And so all these people in 1946 who formed the club got married 50 years earlier. So that was quite cute. And so these are just this is just one of the scrapbooks in the collection. So they wrote down an index of the members admitted since 1949. And so all the members are listed there. And you can see the list of names are prominent people in the community, things like that. You can see the resolutions of the organization, that you have to be married at least 50 years. You have to pay dues, things like that. And then they're starting to write a history about the organization as well. And then unfortunately, they did tape the papers to the scrapbook, but I'm pretty sure at some point the pages will come off because the tape is already starting to come off. But there's poems, things like that in the scrapbook that have more information about them, letters about the organization. And then there's memorial gift. So another part of this organization, unfortunately, was for its members, they would send money to the memorials of their deceased members. So it was a very sweet gesture to do, and most organizations at this time did those types of things and still do. But this was also in their charter. So there's some more history about the organization. This one is fun. So someone used really nice calligraphy to write out the list of the club presidents since its beginning. So you can see there's a lot of different names that are popping out, like ARP is a very prominent name. Aaron's Stoltenberg, I believe Stoltenberg, one of the the Jebbins ran for mayor, I believe, in Davenport. Koch, Albrecht, Martins, Garstang, so very prominent folks in the area. And then these are lists of the members, the past presidents, past vice presidents, secretaries, and treasurers. So they kept detailed history of their memberships and their activities. And then they just have tried to organize really great, like actually genealogical information too, because they also write up little snippets about their members in here as well. And when they're the members that also were admitted to the organization. And these pages are also just more membership lists, but with a little bit of detail. So you can see that they wrote down their children's names and things like that. And then in addition to all that fun history stuff, they did collect a small portion of like anniversary announcements or thank yous and things like that. So this was a thank you to the group about their 50th wedding anniversary. And so there are some photographs of meetings and things like that. They made little ribbons to hand out to folks. Here's another scrapbook. So this scrapbook is different than the historical one. So this is just a scrapbook that contains pretty much all the like little newspaper announcements about everybody's 50th wedding anniversary celebration. So it's really quite fun. They do have some like little ephemera pieces of the parties that they attended or were added into. They have photographs in there, little write-ups. So these ones I took pictures of. These ones because they actually have like little Polaroids and things like that. And then they did clip obituaries too. and to note the passing of their members. And so then they do have, in addition to the minutes and the treasury reports, which I did not include because I don't think you guys would, unless you were doing research on the group, you probably wouldn't care about what they spent their money on. But this is their constitution and bylaws. And so it just outlines the cost of the dues. So it was $2 to be a member, and then it got raised to $5. They had to pass their 50th wedding anniversary together to be a member of the club. So just kind of fun stuff. And then here's some mini meeting minutes from the 80s and 90s, and then some lists of birthdays and anniversaries that they celebrate as an organization as well. So the next collection is the 2020-22 collection. It's the Arson family papers. So these pictures are, I think they're friends of Dolores Albert Lang. This is Winnie and Leon. And so there's just some candid snapshots here by a tree and in the park. It might be even Vanderveer Park, but I'm not sure exactly where the location is because they didn't say. But these papers also, they belong to Dolores D. Albert Lang. So I'm wondering if one of her or her parents or her grandparents were inducted into the Golden Wedding Club. Included in this collection is the Davenport High School 1974 prom booklet, 5 autograph books dating from 1838 to 1946, 1 photographs, black and white photographic prints of D in a navy hat, and then 5 snapshots, a paper napkin imprinted with Robert C. and Dolores A. Lang, dated February 8th, 1952, an official register, and then some other materials about interments. So Otto Albrecht Sr. Married Emma Albrecht, and they had 9 children, one of whom was Amy Hart, who married Charles Arson Sr. They had a daughter named Dolores, who married Lang. And they had a son named Lucky Lang, and that's who donated the collection to us. Otto Albrecht was one of the first cigar store owners west of the Mississippi. He was also a school board on the school board and decided to build Davenport High School. Theodore Hartz was a treasurer of the cigar company, and they took over the business after Otto passed. So Charles Arson Sr. owned the L.E. Shute printing company on Brady Street, and he and his wife had 3 children, Elaine, Charles, and Dolores, and they were members of the outing club. But this collection is really neat. Dee actually, she grew up in Davenport. She moved to Steep Meadow Apartments at the end of her life. She volunteered as a guide at the Rock Island Arsenal Museum and as an ambassador to greet people on people who got off the steamboats and at the airport for the Chamber of Commerce. She started the Salvation Army Christmas clearance program, and she married Mr. Lang in 1952. So this is a cute little postcard that she got from one of her friends. And so it's just talking about her, sending her love and seeing if stuff about dances and things like that. So they're just trying to learn more about that. And I did not notice that this auditorium was actually from Indiana. I'm wondering if that's the theater that I actually attended a concert in. So that's really quite fun. I don't think that's the main one that they use anymore. But I did take a picture of the napkin. So this is Robert and Dolores's or Dee's wedding napkin. And then the collection was pretty small. There was some other like miscellaneous materials like a little sponge and things like that. So things that ended up coming, the sponge is a sponge. It's a yellow sponge. It's actually an advertisement for the Davenport Bank and Trust. And that's why we kept it. We didn't just keep it because it was a sponge. But then this next collection, 2020-24, the Baker family papers. This is mostly photocopies of materials or printed versions of a story that Anna Catherine Baker wrote about her family. And so specifically her mother and her father and their ministry. So her this document was dedicated to the donor by Anna Catherine Baker of Oregon in July 1990. It shares the story of her parents and their service to the communities her father ministered to, as well as the hardships that they faced raising their family on meager earnings. It continues the long time service of her mother to a wealthy Davenport family. Mrs. Baker's hope that her descendants would appreciate Reverend and Mrs. Baker and appreciate the wonderful far-fetching effect that they had on the lives of many people that they ministered to. And so this, there's a copy of this, a printed copy, and then a copy, and then some photocopies of Bible entries and an 1886 essay and a graduation certificate from Scottsdale, Pennsylvania. So Anna Catherine was the daughter of Reverend William Frank and Julia Baker. Reverend Baker was a Methodist minister who served from about 1900 to 1920, mainly in Missouri, and he got moved a lot. He died from the Spanish influenza, so a whole bunch of people were dying, and she said even in the letter that people were afraid to like talk to each other, and because whole families were passing away due to the influenza. In February of 1920, he left his wife and 3 young children nearly penniless. So they made do in Bruckner, Missouri until about 1926, when they had learned of an aunt who died in Davenport and left them money. They moved to Davenport only to find that their inheritance had been lost. So the family members had spent it all, the other children. But they decided to stay in Davenport and continue to work on their education and working to make ends meet. So at that time, when they moved to Davenport, they're like, oh, we'll buy a house and not have to live in these apartments, things like that. And then we can have enough money to continue our education. But that got dashed. Julia worked as a practical nurse. So the mother worked as a practical nurse and took a place with Miss Kate Dutton, the sister of Alice Dutton Atwill and Jeannie Dutton Green, all of whom were musicians of notoriety. Julia remained at Atwill's employ for over 20 years until her health deteriorated to a point where she could no longer be of assistance. Mrs. Atwill died in 1946 and appointed Julia to be the executor of her will, but unfortunately she did not leave Julia any money. Julia Baker remained on her own in her own home on Dover Court until she was about 91 years old. She did die of cancer in 1960. Anna Catherine taught school in Davenport and Rock Island, retiring in 1971. She moved to Portland, Oregon in about 1982, and then died there in 1994. She's buried in Oakdale Cemetery in Davenport. She never married, but both of her brothers did. Her mom also had a really tough story too. So she starts off with her mom living in England. Her mother died really early in her life. Her father remarried. The stepmother didn't like her, so they shipped her off to boarding school as soon as possible. Then her dad died. I think she was done with school and she was about to get married. And so then her husband, or her would-be husband, died, but then the fiance's mother took pity on her, Mrs. Sumner, and brought her to America with her. So really took her under her wing and so tried to support her. And then they came over here. They lived in Pennsylvania. She was actually in the orphans court, but then she became a practical nurse. So she just kind of tried to help out with that way. But then she met her would-be husband, and then they moved. But the Mrs. Sumner's daughter, Mrs. Skep, really helped out too. So they were able to make friends and get help along the way. But it's quite a trial, a tale of trials. The next collection is just cute. Even though it doesn't seem like a love letter or a love story, it kind of is. So it is our 2017 27 collection of the National Association of Letter Carriers and the Auxiliary 129. And so this is actually a collection that was donated by a husband and wife. So the items pertain to Davenport residents Edward A. and Margaret Schneiden Gilbert and their activities with the Letter Carriers Association. So Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert, or Mr. Gilbert was a mail carrier for 30 years. The information is gleaned from his 1974 obituary. The couple were married. They were married in 1950, but she really supported him in this profession. So he was a member of the National Letter Carriers Association, and then she became a member of the Auxiliary, which are it's traditionally a woman's organization that was not the main organization, but it's pretty much the same, but for women. So they went and attended national annual conventions in Iowa and then the state in the nation. So it's just really fun. So you can see that they saved their name tags. And she was a delegate from Davenport. In addition to these materials, there's also really great photographs of them and their family. And then I thought I like this. I don't know the context of this photo, if it's around Valentine's Day or what, but they have heart-shaped boxes that look like they contain candy in them. So it's quite cute. But then there's also like little pieces of realia. So this little plastic container that actually has plastic sleepy things inside of it. I didn't really know if it was like something to put labels on your clothes or whatnot, but you can see that there's pamphlets and handouts of bylaws for the ladies auxiliary to the letter carriers for the state of Iowa. So it's not necessarily a traditional love story in the sense that there's letters and things like that, but you can see the passion that these two people had for his profession and the work that he did. Then the next collection is the 2019-81, the Horseman family papers. So this one, I was telling one of our attendees about it a little bit earlier. So initially, I was looking at this collection for Shirley Horseman and her love of gardening, but I ended up finding a really nice collection of love letters. So this collection contains a great deal of documentation on Durant, Iowa education and the life of Shirley Horseman, including her family. It also includes historic photographs, images of Horseman and Shoemaker families in Clinton and Scott counties, baptismal and marriage records, school diplomas, certificates of achievement, correspondence between her parents in the 1940s, and is included as other Horseman family correspondence as well. School documents, funeral cards, memory books of family members are part of the collection. Durant High School yearbooks also, and then also her senior memory book. So Shirley's senior memory book is included as well. So Shirley Rose Horseman was born May 19th, 1949 to Edward Otto and Valeria Catherine Shoemaker Horseman in Clinton County, Iowa. She grew up in Durant, graduating from Durant High School in 1967. She graduated from flight attendant school and then began working at Davenport's neighborhood development program. In 1973, she became a manager of the Davenport Housing Commission's 75 unit leased housing program, worked for HUD, and eventually was named the director of Davenport Housing Commission, opening the Heritage High Rise in 1977. And in 1980, she graduated from Scott Community College with an Associate's in Science degree. In 1984, she received her doctorate in chiropractic, summa cum laude from Palmer Chiropractic College. Shirley also worked for UPS for 27 years until she retired, and she loved to travel and garden, and she really, really loved animals as well. And she worked in her flower garden. She volunteered for Nahum Marsh. She died in 2019 and is buried at Walcott Cemetery. Her father, Edward, was born in 1913 on the Horseman Farm near Big Rock, Iowa. Attended school in Wheatland, and then he married Valerie Shoemaker in 1948 after serving in the Army during World War II. He worked as a technician at Bendix and passed away in 2000. Her mother was born in 1913 in Scott County. She raised Shirley and Jerry and passed away in 1999. And then Shirley did have a younger brother, Jerry, who was born in 1953. He also graduated from Durant High School and served in the U.S. military from 1972 to 1975. He married Linda Richmond in 1976, and he died in a traffic accident in 1986. But these letters, so this is the only letter from Ed or Eddie to Valeria. So he calls her "Hello, little stranger," and so it's quite cute. So, and I think he calls himself an old stranger, but this is before they got married in 1944, and so you can see how lengthy of a letter that he wrote to her, and he was using little cute names and things to call her, but you can see how much he wrote at this time. But she wrote most of our other correspondence is from her to him. So this is one of the earlier letters that she wrote to him. And she says, love and kisses, dear Eddie. She explains what she does during her day, who she talked to. Most of the time she's writing before bed. So she tends to say that she'll write a couple lines, scratch off a few lines before she goes to bed. But you can see kind of how the language changes. So she's calling him honey now, still the love and kisses. This next letter, she likes to call him darling a lot. And still the love and kisses. This is still before they got married. Then you can see that she's, oh, from your sweet darling. So it's quite cute, and they talk about seeing each other off and on, and most of these letters are to Big Rock, Iowa. So this one is darling. So love and kisses to the sweetest, handsomest darling in the world, and then tons of X's at the end of her letters. So this is the most stereotypical like love story, love letters that we have in our collections that we could find. We probably have more, but we don't organize our collections based on love letters, so it was kind of hard to find specific examples of love stories in the collection, because that's not what we always focus on. We want the details about the people and the genealogy and the history, not always the lovey-dovey stuff. Then this one is so they got married in 1948. We might have to do some research, you guys, to see if, because this is 1947. So she says, good evening. And then at the end, she says, love and kisses for the most sweetest and best looking hubby in the world. So I love all of her sign-offs because they're quite long and sweet. And then she says, love and kisses for the most handsomest, best looking, sweetest, I think, dearest hubby in the earth. And then she says, signs off as wifey. So they're really trying to like tell each other everything about what's going on in their world. And she writes them often. So sometimes like every few days she writes him. This one was kind of sad, so she must have been feeling a little blue and lonesome, because she said that they'll see each other Thursday, but she says, love and kisses for the most handsomest man on earth from your blue and sad heart's wifey. So a little bit different tune from her in that letter. But she does talk about kind of being a little bit sadder and things like that in some of the letters. So these are just more of the same, but they're really quite cute. But you can see that her stationery has changed in this one. She has stationery for Mrs. Edward Horseman of Mississippi Avenue. So in this next one, you can see that she still calls herself wifey and him hubby, but you can see her stationery is even the envelopes and the letter, the paper that she writes on is different. Then I'm just going to go kind of quickly through these last ones because you guys are being troopers. So these are postcards from our collection. So we just have a few that are relating to love. So we really like this one. I think I bought this one off of eBay, which was quite cute because it's, have you hugged your hogs today? And that little piggy loves his hug or her hugs because there's tons of little hearts coming out of it. And it's just a local restaurant that we have here in Davenport. And we do love our pigs here in Davenport. Then this one is another one that we purchased. It don't take much to make, and they scratched out me and you happy, and I know a little girl in Davenport that could do it. So this Doretta is talking to Edward, and he lives up in Clinton, and she's like, oh, you would be much happier in a bigger town like Davenport than Clinton because it has a lot more to do, and I'm here. So this is from 1915. That other one is one of our newer ones. Oh, we don't have a date, but we can certainly tell that it's a newer postcard. And then this next one, so this is a snapshot taken in Davenport, and there's this couple that's smooching by the seashore. And so this one is from a child to her mother, and so it's just talking about catching up with her, and said that they got her card, and she lives down in Burlington, but she must have just found this cute little postcard and sent it to her mom. But then we do have materials in our collection, in our book collection. So these are all like young adult books about love. So John Ripslinger and his wife are both from Davenport. They have been married for over 50 years. They have 6 children and 12 grandchildren. And so he taught English for 35 years, and the last 33 of those years he taught at Davenport West High School. He is a veteran of the Korean Civil War, or not Civil War, Korean War. And then he also, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought because I said Civil War. But he wrote a number of these books, so they're all published by smaller publishing houses, but the first one is set in a high school. I think all of them are kind of set young adult or teenage years. Angel McPherson and Danny Henderson are the main folks. It's just about trust and love, and doing things with friends. And then Derailed is about Wendell and Robin Knight. And so he wrote these books around 2006 through 2013. They're all about different issues that he would want to write about to help younger people kind of deal with different things in their life. And then Last Kiss is one of his other books. So you guys, if you are interested, you guys can come read them in special collections. Some other love stories that we have in our collection are the George Cram Cook and Susan Glaspell. So we have books written by both of these famous authors and writers. And so this is just a demonstration of how love stories that get started in Davenport. So both of them lived in Davenport. He was born on the East Coast, and she was born here in Iowa to a hay farmer. She grew up here, and then she went away and then came back, and they ended up meeting and moving to New York and founding the Princeton Players and became really influential. They traveled a lot. He ended up passing away in Greece, and then she continued to move around and write. But it's just a different way to look at it. And I believe this book is about their journeys in life and when they met and the different activities that they took part in. And then this one is really special for us because The Second Chances, a family love story. Mary Lewis is from a native of Davenport. for where 3 previous generations of her family lived. She is a graduate of Iowa State University and Clark College in Dubuque, Iowa. She taught elementary school primarily in River Forest, Illinois for 27 years. Her and her husband, Terry, retired to Tucson, Arizona. They have 1 daughter and 3 grandchildren. Her motivation in writing this book was to share to her grandchildren stories about her grandmother and great-grandmother to exemplify a family's love for one another. She hopes this book will motivate others to search and preserve family history, to share personal stories with their children and grandchildren. So we actually helped her research her family quite a bit. And then she also came and did a presentation on this story too. And so it's about her ancestor who was an orphan who came and was trying to figure out what, like, the story of her mother, her German mother. And so it's just a really endearing story that we have in our collection, and it's Genealogy and Love. And then this is a book that was set in Iowa, but not written by an Iowan. It's written by a Hoosier from Indiana. But they gave the book to Mayor Gluba, who gave it to us. And so Edward James Ratty wrote this book about an Iowa farm boy during the Civil War. He talks about his love and finding that, and it's a really sweet book about that time period. And then, as we probably all know about the Bridge of Madison County, so this is just another love story set in Iowa. And then a couple other ones that we found. So In the Shadow of Love is a book that was written by an Iowan, but it's not set here in Iowa. But I really like The Love's Gamble. So Lauren Phillips, she was a lawyer, or she is a lawyer who lives on the Iowa side of the Mississippi River. They love going to Iowa Hawkeye games and all that sorts of fun stuff. But this story takes place in Iowa. So she mentions Dubuque, Davenport, all these fun things, LeClaire. So it's quite, it'd be a really fun read to dive into this love story that's set in this area. And then we have another local or Iowa author who writes about stories about women in the heartland, and they are all taking place during like World War I or World War II. And so Gail Kittleson has done presentations for us at the library about these books, and then how to write historical fiction based on genealogy research and things like that. But these are all really great tales about love. Then we also have The Big River and Other Selected Poems. This is by Dan Titus. So this is the only poem about love. It's on falling in love. Don't ask me how you're going to feel to be head over heels in love. And don't expect to get a sign or guidance from above. No one else can tell you, be he friend or foe, how you'll know when you're in love. Don't worry, you'll know. And so that was his little poem about that. All of his other ones are about different things. Then we have this Love, Leadership, and Legacy book. It's quite a bit about love. So I was going to read you guys some more, but I'm keeping you guys longer than I intended. So you guys just will have to come down and read them. They're quite short. You could probably read them in a half an hour. But they're cute. And then you get to see all this like cute writing all over. I'm thinking that it's intentional. And then we have this collection of All You Need Is Love, Living Our Values Every Day. So they're student poems from Hayes Elementary, Kimberly Center East high school students, and then Garfield student poems. And most of them are just about love. And then our last one is about John F. or John Forrest and Anna Price Dillon. So on June 19th, 1835, John Forrest Dillon married Anna Marjorie Price. They had 2 sons and 1 daughter. They were prominent members of Davenport community, the Davenport community. John Dillon was a judge, and he made lasting impacts on the landscape of Davenport. If you guys know about the Dillon Fountain that was erected by him, if you've been to Oakdale Memorial, there's a large obelisk in that was once the largest obelisk west of the Mississippi, that was erected for actually his wife and his daughter, Mrs. Annie Dillon Oliver. They both died in the sinking of the French ocean liner, the SS El Bourgnon, in July 1898. So unfortunately, they had tragic deaths. So he erected that for them. But this memoir, Memoirs and Memorials, is written by him about, and it details her letters that she wrote and then just her history. But I have it in front of me. It is, I'll read the little inscription that he wrote. This inadequate memoir, these scant memorials are of the rare woman here commemorated, are affectionately inscribed to her children and grandchildren in the hope that they and their descendants may thereby it be enabled more fully to realize that her life was wholly consecrated to home and duty, and that her name, virtue, and memory are their most precious inheritance in a benediction evermore. So he wrote that very lovingly, and it's a large book. It's 500 pages with an appendix. So it's quite a big book of love about her life and their life together. But this page just documents her dedication to her children and her love for them. So her love of her children forms the warp and the woof of so many of her letters that it needs no special emphasis in this place. In addition to what her letters reveal, it is sufficient here to state that this love knew no bounds or depths. It was perennial, having its roots in its deepest recesses of her nature. So it's just a very sweet memorial to his wife. But I recommend that you guys read it. They are featured prominently in special collections because we have several portraits of them, both in a younger and older age. So you get to see how they looked. Then last off, I'll leave you guys with this last photo from a picture book that's in our collection, Love is All Around Iowa. And so we get featured as one of the cities in the book. So I believe this, because I've seen other books like this for other states, but they try to make it unique to this area. And so this was published in 2016, and it's just a sweet little picture book about loving Iowa and being loved in Iowa. But thank you guys so much. I'm going to end the recording really quick.